Hello, welcome to another live Save Your Books video. This one is on finishing up the fairy tales book. We're going to add this label and we're going to touch up the corners and the edges that need just a little bit more help. All right, let's get started. All right. Now, don't forget if you're out there to like the video, like this live restoration, and to share it. That's always a nice thing. All right, so I thought I would start out with the edges and the corners and get those taken care of. Oh, and don't forget we're going to vote on the next project, so that's a good thing. Let's see. So I've already done a little bit of the rear board. I did some touch up to the corners and including some coloring. And there's several different ways you can color the edges, and I'll show you on the front board here. Oh, hi Tom. So you've got, some fading right on the edges, and especially right on the edges of the corners. Yes, you can see that it's not brown anymore, and the book is brown. So we have some options. Of course, people always want to just go to markers, but markers tend to spread further on an area than you actually want them to. And so for this, I actually am going to recommend using some acrylic paint, and this raw umber has been such a, it's the best old book color that there is out there. And you can just open it up. I mean, you don't want to keep dipping this in and contaminating the area with, I don't know, anything. So you can put the paint onto a piece of paper and then dip it out. But I'm almost at the end of my tube here, so I'm just going to kind of do it from that. And so the reason we want to do this coloring is that if we do the paste or glue that we're going to use to consolidate these areas that are all fluffy still, the paint won't necessarily go on there, but I'm gonna do an example of that. So here we go. Before I start there, and just prop that up, I'm going to protect my beautiful end sheets with a piece of wax paper, and I'm going to actually prop up the book. I hope we can see this here. Oh, I moved that. It's over here now. Okay, so that's pretty good. You can kind of see that. So I'm just doing a little touch up here, and actually this is perfect. I'm dampening this end of the Q-tip here, cotton swab, to kind of spread out the paint once it's on just a little bit. That's one of the great things about paint, is that you can move it around, thin it out. It doesn't have to be so exact. I mean, let's keep in mind this is not a collectible book. This is just a book for my own personal library. But see here, I'm trying to get all the little edges. And I'm kind of just rolling this along and then flipping it over and using the other side to just spread it out. All right. And I get on my fingers, and I have a clean, damp rag nearby at all times, just in case. Here I'm noticing that there's some residue from probably adhesive, I'm figuring. It's kind of nice just to touch that up a little bit. And just, oops, here we go. Hi, Stephen. All right. Get a little more of that. Gonna do this side. Right. Less is more here. I just want to get a little bit of that acrylic paint on there. And the kinds of things I'm showing you here on these live restoration videos is kind of the faster ways to do things. And that's partly because, you know, watching restoration when you're taking your time going really, really slowly is a little more boring. So I'm kind of just kind of nodding to that, going, yeah, we're going to speed things up just a little bit. I will always appear on these live videos as though I'm taking a little less care, and it's just for speed, for your own sake. But you'll notice that things come out okay anyway. Oops, here we go. So this is all just the color touch up here, and I happen to know that there is one more spot that needs some color touch up, and that's here on the backboard. Has one of those spots where the cloth just split. Oh, I am being incautious here. Don't forget to move that. You don't want to get a splotch of paint suddenly. You can also move things around with your fingers, but then you have to wipe them off. So there we go. Look at that. All right. Just going to close that up. All right, since I'm on the back here, I'm just going to start by fixing that little crack. Now, while I will almost always tell you to use paste. Oh, thanks, Steve. Bye. For this particular edge, paste is more likely to just kind of not hold it right here, because there's a spot where your fingers can flip up the edge of it. So, and in any future restoration, this is the kind of place that would get probably new cloth or whatever. So I'm not too worried about it. It's just, that's a good, PVA is completely reasonable to use on such an edge of a book like this. All right. And while I'm in the back, these ones that I've already done are dry now, which means that I can add a little bit of this SC6000, which will kind of protect the corner. And keep it shiny. I don't want to do too much or like do this all over the book, because really it's like I just touched up the corners a little bit, so I'm just protecting those. Okay, back to the front where I've already done some work. So when you have corners that are mushy like this, you can see it's kind of bending back and forth. You have to open it up further than you would think to get paste all the way into the board. And because of that, and then there's a danger to getting the original cloth soaked with any substance, paste or glue or anything, and having it change. And so you want to, when you're consolidating the boards to make the corners stiff again, you want to just work with the board and then let that dry. So I'll show you what I'm talking about here. on this side. I'm actually cutting that open, you can see, because I want to get the corner all the way back. And now I can start prying apart the boards. That little bit of paint color touch-up that I did on top of it won't make this corner stuck together. If I'd put a lot of paint on it, might have, but I only put a little bit, so. All right, you can see I'm just kind of reaching in there and kind of propping it open. All right, then I need to get some paste into all of those layers. You don't have to get every single one. I'm not sure why. I mean, obviously the paste travels through. So I'm going to skip pasting the original cloth, and I'm going to go to whatever the next layers are and getting the paste in there. And eventually you're kind of like, okay, that's a lot of paste, and I'm just going to squeeze it and kind of clean that off a little bit, and then you can kind of approach it again and see what has not stuck down together. Find when I pry it open again, there are more spots that need some paste. But that's actually looking pretty good. And now, as you can see on this one, it's like I let this one dry and it's perfectly stiff now. I'm just going to kind of skip ahead on this one because we're live. You could use a hairdryer and dry it. So I'm gluing the whole thing down, pasting the whole thing down. On this one, even though, well, we'll see what happens. Let's find out if anything happens that's bad. One of the things about these corners when you're working on them is that because it has this extra folded bit from when the case was made originally, there's this odd extra flap here, really. And I have found almost always that I need to throw a little PVA right there on that little corner bit just to really keep that stuck down. And sometimes I'll even put a bit of Japanese tissue over that, especially to help, disguise the fact that this is torn. You can take a tiny bit, I mean really tiny, and to be super fancy, you could paint this with that paint we had and apply it that way, or just, the paste won't work alone on this. It just won't stick. You need that extra flexibility from the PVA. But just doing that little corner, and even this tiny little amount, this little sliver of Japanese tissue that I've done here, that could have been half the width even. Hard to kind of get at, but there we go. And use a piece of wax paper to help you press that into shape. If I'd had too much paste, there'd be a lot of squeeze out, which is unfortunate. If you want to let this dry super flat, you can do this. Oh, hi Peter. And now I'm going to just move on to this side again. Because I did the corner already and it's dry, this is the safer way to do this for sure. Try and avoid getting the paste onto the original cloth. You don't want it on the front of it. So I'm constantly cleaning my fingers off. Got a little Teflon folder here. once again, this little bit that's folded is, I don't know, problematic. So I'm going to put a little PVA in there. I just feel like in the grand scheme of things, that is the best thing to do right there. Okay. And I'm going to do this. And the way I made that corner stiff in the first place was I would take these little, you know, chips of cardboard or just the clip, and I actually would do that with the cloth pulled back, and now I can close it. I'm kind of doing this to kind of show you, you know, potential things that could go wrong. If you squish this while the cloth is wet from paste or glue, it can discolor it. So I did that for just a couple of seconds and it seems to be fine, but I'll just tell you, it's like I've done it before and it has not been fine. So best to really be extra cautious. Basically don't get things really wet and squish them. That's their rule right there. I'll have to write that down somewhere. Okay, so that's coloring the edges and the corners. Let's see. Yeah, I just wanted to cover a couple more things. In that you will be tempted to color onto your book edges instead of using the paint, using these markers, and really it's just, I just want to really emphasize, don't be fooled. And if you are going to do it, which I'm still going to say don't do it, but if you are going to do it, because people do these things, this is the way to do it. You're going to want to get a cotton swab damp. So I've sprayed that with water. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to transfer the color from the marker onto the cotton swab, and that way you have way more control over where the color goes. So then you would go like that. And once again, maybe don't do it. All right. Moving on. All right. Oh, the next thing I wanted to talk about was text block edges. But before I do that, I just want to kind of do a teaser and show you the new projects that we're going to have. We get to choose one of these. So I hope that you help me out here and help me choose either the Little Engine That Could, the Pronunciation for Singers, or the Long Winter. And I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail later on. Meanwhile, I wanted to show you a little bit more about the text block edges. So in the front here, we've got this new end sheet, and you can see it's very bright, very brightly showing up instead of looking nice and old. And what I would say is that we can take a pair of scissors and trim around the edges so that it won't stand out as much. And that's one thing to do to make it look better. You can't do this if you've got a fancy end sheet where you've actually folded the front. But these are not that. So just making that a thing. There we go. And then once I've done that, you can see what I did in the front here is I used a color pencil and I just touched up that whiteness to kind of make it disappear a little more. And I've got this great Derwent Van Dyke Brown, which is my favorite dirt colored pencil. And I actually already did the top there on that one. So I'll go ahead and go around to the side here. And the colored pencil is the safest way to do this. You really do not want to do this with markers or paint, for goodness sake. But I'm just taking that bright white edge off. And same thing here. It's a nicety. It's something you obviously don't have to do, but when it's done, the book doesn't, I don't know, all the new stuff doesn't stand out, and I just prefer that. I just have to do this other side. Last one. That's what you get with live restoration. Doing the same things over and over again. Okay, there we go. And I will just show you really quickly. See now, nothing's standing out. Lovely. Here, I did this thing. Obviously don't use a Sharpie, but the reason why you don't want to use a Sharpie for this is that it bleeds and it's really hard to control. And here I've used one of my lovely Prismacolor pens, but you know, I'm drawing along and I just made an oops. So, you know, they're just hard to control, and with a colored pencil you can just erase it, so no big deal. I did this side with the distress marker and it was definitely better. That's it's partly because it's a brush tip, and I just could go along the edge and it was easier to control, but still it's a marker, very dangerous. And anyway, so here I've got the color pencil side, and it just really obviously best and safest for text edges to color. All right, now let's get on to the label, which I've already printed out. I believe I covered printing this out in another one of the earlier videos. But if I didn't, you can just print it out on any paper that will look good. Don't print it out on white computer paper. That's not going to look any good. But there are lots of papers that will go through, that will be archival. So let's stick with those. All right. And I'm just going to line up my lines. So this has to be on this side so that I can trim head and tail first, and that'll make it easier for me to get to the next part. So just picking a line. That's one. That's two. All right, and then always make sure your book is, you know, right side up and all that. You just kind of pick a spot that looks good. I like to put it fairly close to the top. And I'm only gonna make a pencil mark. I'm looking straight down where the very edge of the spine is. And same on the other side. And just a little bit in from it. I definitely don't want it to be on the edge. And here we go. We just line this up again. And do it this way. And oh, before I did this, before I am trimming this, after I printed it, I used a preservative to make sure that the lettering would not move around after, while I'm fiddling with it here. I'm just using a laser printer, so it's not particularly like stuck on there. So the preservative is pretty necessary. All right, that's pretty good. And I can just paste it out. And because I'm not working with any original material here right now, either on the spine or the label, I'm going to double down and also do some PVA. Oh, almost put it on upside down. Don't do that. Don't put it on upside down. Oh my goodness. All right. All right. Get it touched up there. And I'm just trying to keep everything lined up. And you get a piece of wax paper, gently rubbing it down a little bit. And as it dries, you could rub it down a little harder, but basically there's that nice label. I guess I could have thought about this a little more and said I want to line this up perfectly with that, but I think I did a pretty good job. I like where it is. So that's great. That actually means that this book is done. There's nothing else to do. I'm like, there's nothing else to do. I'm like, oh, except trim that one little thing that's sticking out. What is that? Oh, okay, got it. And there you go. And here's our book. It's all in one piece. Yay! After all that. All right, well now let's get to the fun part. Oh, before I do that, I just wanted to show you some other examples of making my own little labels. These are some books that I did a bunch of repairs to. Well, this is a new cover. Fun paper from, oh God, that place in Minneapolis that I love, Cave Paper. This is some cave paper. I love it because it just is it's like tree calf with paper. Anyway, so there's a little label I made for it. This one, and you can see these on my Instagram account as well. This is all just paper. I was restoring, or these are quick repairs, quick preservation things for books that were in really bad shape, and they're all done with, this is all paper. Even this, just paper. So anyway, just another example to see how these labels can look really nice. All right. Now we're going to choose the next project to work on. So this one's very similar. I actually think this is a first edition that I just came across. It's an ex-library book. So there's kind of a lot to contemplate. Maybe we'll get rid of those things. Maybe we will leave them as part of the, the provenance, the history of the book. There's a tear to be dealt with. It's going to be similar to the book we just finished in that it needs a new spine. And I've got this Japanese tissue that I have that happens to match really well, so I was just going to use that. So that's one project. Another project possibility is this book, Pronunciation for Singers, and what this needs is just to be recased. So it's still attached all the way across, and so what I can do is remove the case, strengthen the spine, and then put the text block back in. And so that, pretty simple restoration we can do. And then the third one is The Little Engine That Could, which I got at a garage sale. Somebody just put this sticker on, and I started trying to remove it, and I could tell it's stuck to the paper, and it's just going to pull the paper right off. I'm like, oh no. So that's one thing. And then there's a plate here, and there's also a little bit of crayon going on in here, little orange crayon. And I actually think this is a first edition too, so kind of a fun thing to restore. Anyway, please vote. Let me know. Share the video. Oh, I'll come up here. You can see me again. Here, hi. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of restoring the Fairy Tales book, which I am so happy to have done, and will be able to just put this on my shelf now. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.